It's a really exciting day in Cambridge's civic calendar today. It's Bin Emptying Scrutiny Day. So I'm here at the Guildhall in Cambridge, where the Environment Scrutiny Committee is due to start shortly. One of the things that the Environment Scrutiny Committee will be considering is the crisis that we've had recently in emptying of Cambridge's bins. Now, bin emptying is something which is really important. If you ask people what they care about in terms of what Cambridge City Council does, the top answer is emptying the bins. And for many people, emptying the bins is pretty much what they get from Cambridge City Council in return for paying their council tax. Now, recently there have been thousands of bins every week that haven't been emptied when they've been due to be emptied by Cambridge City Council. Now, that's something which today our councillors will get a chance to question the Executive Councillor for bins on. Now, previously, the only person who's interviewed an Executive Councillor for bins since the crisis started is me. I caught the previous Executive Councillor, Councillor Roberts, as he was leaving the Guildhall a few weeks ago. There was no opportunity at a recent, there was intended to be a recent full council, but that was cancelled due to the elections, so there was no opportunity there for councillors to question Councillor Roberts before he left the role. The new councillor, who's been in post now for about a month, is Councillor Rosie Moore. Now, I've made a freedom of information request which I made after some people working in the bin emptying service got in touch with me to suggest things which I could usefully ask and could usefully inform councillors in their decision-making process. And hopefully that will help councillors scrutinise the Executive Councillor today. Something that I found out was that there are no regular reports, no regular management reports on the performance of the service or the costs of the service. Now, perhaps that's something which the new Executive Councillor will have put in place since coming into office. We'll see that today. It's also really interesting that in response to my FOI request, the council had to provide the information which I asked for, and it's interesting that that's different in many ways than the information which has been voluntarily put forward to councillors by council officers. For example, it includes information on the amount of agency workers that are used and on managers who have been filling in because of a lack of staff to work emptying the bins. Now, the problems, it's important not to overstate the problems. There are thousands of bins being unemptied every week still in Cambridge. However, the council is catching up with those within a day or so. But there are a handful of people who are reporting a build-up of rubbish in their homes, and that's, of course, particularly problematic for people who live in houses or in terraces where they don't have a place outside of the house to put their bins. And we've also heard at the area committees that there's been a particular problem emptying bins from flats. I think that's a slightly different a slightly different issue there.
So move on to item 7, which is on page 89. And the report on share services and report will be from Jane Hunt. I'll let you carry on.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gilthorpe. I just wanted to clarify as well, we actually have 2 reports in the pack which have been merged together slightly. The first is the draft annual report for 2016-17, which is a standard and will-be annual report coming to committee. And the second is the officer-led shared waste service bin day collection initial project review. So I think it might be helpful if we just take those in order. Alongside me, I'm pleased to say, Mike Parsons, our operations manager, who's been able to join the meeting this afternoon. Between us, we hope we can answer any questions during the debate while the meeting's taking away. So I'll start with the annual report, just as an overview. What you'll see on your first page of the report is a recap to the background of the shared waste service, which was created in October 14 following discussion within South Cambs and City. And we've seen quite a lot of progress, obviously, since 2014 on, for example, moving to a shared depot and all the various changes associated with that. Progress in 2016-17 has been quite significant. Key aspects following the depot changes and the recruitment of the senior management team was that the commercial service, both commercial services from South Cambs and the City, were brought into the shared waste service, which until then had been focused only on domestic services and the street cleansing operation in South Cambridgeshire. That team has now also relocated to the Water Beach depot. We've also been through a a process towards the end of last calendar year of consulting on, and then early this year, in February, transferring the remaining, previously city employed staff to the employment of South Cambridgeshire District Council as the lead authority for the shared waste service. And we've also completed a restructure of the majority of the office-based teams, with the exception being the commercial service. The next major part of the shared waste plan was obviously to look at bin round changes and to optimise the domestic route collections, and that's obviously the subject of the next paper in any case. So those are key activities in 2016-17. And then you have in section 3 outlined the priorities as we see them for 2017-18. A huge part of the day-to-day work of the shared waste service is domestic and obviously commercial as well, collection services. That's the vast majority of what our workforce spend their time doing, and the continued optimisation of rounds, which actually happens fortnightly, is something that will take up the vast majority of the service's time in the coming year, or in this year that we're now in. Obviously, and as we'll discuss later, further changes to domestic bin rounds are normal part of the job, but they are continuing the pace further to the initial changes brought in February. So that's a huge priority for certainly for Mike and his operational team. We're also, as with any organisation, I think after a period of change, looking at making sure all the staff who are currently largely in new roles have the training and support that they need. A huge proportion, obviously, of the jobs, of the tasks that the service delivers remain the same, but individuals do have changes to their roles, and that's something we must reflect and support them with over the coming years. So we're embedding some of those changes. And we also have priorities, particularly around fleet replacement, ownership and management. We've recently moved all of the maintenance of owned vehicles across to Cambridge City's garage, for example, and continuing our work on how we manage our fleet. And health and safety, we now have a post, a proportion of which is dedicated to ensuring the safe operation of the fleet and our operatives, as well as office-based staff, and keeping up with and prioritising further activities on health and safety is also a key issue for us. You've also got a list of other priorities, all of which are worth specific mention, as I've said, but probably smaller in scope, particularly for City. But the last sentence is important, which is obviously the new permanent head of service. Trevor Nichol has been recruited and will be starting at the service in September, and I will be staying as interim head of service until that time to assure a good handover.
Thank you for that. And as this wasn't this is a long key item, however, it has been called in for debate. So I'll try open to the floor. We do have two speakers, Councillor O'Connell and Peter Roberts.
Can you just give us some guidance? There are two reports, as Jane has indicated.
Mm-hmm.
Are we having?
I think
on one before we go on to the other, or? I think that would be the way to proceed, because they're like I say, they are two separate reports. So we'll take the first one first. It's the annual report on single shared waste services. So do you want to come in, Councillor Big? Thanks, Chair. With reference to this report, then, the report records the fact that that the staff, apart from the management, who were already employed by South Cambridgeshire, were transferred into South Cambridgeshire's employment during this year. And I understand that a decision was taken to leave the two groups of employees on different terms and conditions of employment after doing that. And I wondered if officers could explain the advantages of pursuing the route of leaving people on different terms and conditions of employment whilst supporting an integrated service.
Thank you. The transfer obviously was subject to standard consultation with crew members and also with unions. And I think it's fair to say the outcome for the single shed waste service, from an operational point of view, there is another layer of complexity when dealing with separate terms and conditions, but that's entirely manageable and it's something we are used to working with. I think the majority of the discussion and debate around the limited number of changes we could make around, for example, pay date and other things, were very much influenced by wider ongoing discussions across the councils on harmonisation or the streamlining of the various terms and conditions for staff, and that's something we continue to have an ongoing involvement with. It's certainly our intention that we certainly pay, reward and support all staff equally, and that's something that we would like to see in the future, but we appreciate with part of wider discussions on the part of the council.
Yes, I think that the reason for my question is that it's probably quite difficult from the outside to understand how you can really create one team and an integrated team, which is what we needed for the shared service to work at, as well as it should do, to understand how that's possible when we aren't treating all the staff equally. I mean, I accept that's the aspiration, but it clearly isn't the case. And I wonder, I mean, do we have crews made up of people, individual crews made up of different people on different terms and conditions of employment from each other? Or have we actually got sort of city conditions crews and South Cambs conditions crews?
We do have crews day to day who will be out operating who work to different terms and conditions. I would also say that obviously South Cambridgeshire, those who were originally recruited and retained by South Cambridgeshire are perceived by many to have elevated or advantages over those previously employed by City, and those previously City employees on City terms and conditions who wish to transfer to a South Cambridgeshire contract are entirely eligible to do so, and that will be supported by the service.
Can I just say, on these sorts of issues where there is it's like when a firm amalgamates, there's always going to be a discussion about harmonisation in terms and conditions, and as long as the officers and the union work together so we can make this process as painless as possible, I can't see a problem.
I can just come back, Chair, on your comment. I mean, I'm fully aware and quite experienced in bringing organisations together, and normally it's item number one on the agenda after the transfers to harmonise terms and conditions of employment, to remove barriers between employers working closely together. That was the reason for my question, but I got an answer clearly.
Okay. So if there's no more on that, then we'll move to the second half of the ABCD project review, and that's Jane again.
Thank you very much. So the report you have in front of you is the initial project review, which is something we routinely undertake where we deliver major projects. This review covers the period covering planning and design of the domestic bin collection changes through to the third month of operations. It, as I said, has been a major project and a very key part of the original plan of delivering a shared waste service. It's affected 82% of residents, and we service over 120,000 residents across both authority geographies. We've obviously got a previous historical pattern of collections, which when mapped has been a patchwork quilt for Mike to manage in terms of sending out vehicles and crews and operating to really quite different collection regimes as well. The intention of the project obviously is to make that operation more efficient, operation easier, and give us more flexibility when dealing with growth, which obviously is a major part of the future of the city particularly. It's a fairly lengthy and detailed report, so I'll take most of it as read. The key things I would draw out is that this has been a project which has been designed, I'd say 90% of the work, or 95% of the work in the planning and design and implementation of the project has been done in-house. We do benefit from having a huge amount of experience within the service. You've dealt with bin day changes both in South Cambs and City before now. We also have a data and modelling team, and as I say, a lot of experience on the part of crews, drivers and loaders in delivering these sorts of changes. So the majority of the work was done in-house, but we did have some quality assurance done for us as well. The planning and design really used an awful lot of different elements. First, simply logic, and I think that can be illustrated also by the map, which shows how we've tried to group collection days geographically around the geography. Software, which is hugely important. There will always be debates about whether or not we use common sense or computers, but obviously for us it's important to use both. This is a huge logistical operation. It is a massive set of over 320 rounds. We collect over 30,000 bins daily, and the sort of detail that goes into the planning of that change programme is huge. And we are supported very definitely by bespoke software, as the majority of local authorities use. People, obviously, who do this, who collect bins, are a key part of our business, and we've tried various routes to make sure that the drivers and loaders, the supervisors and those with other experience have had an input to help them design the rounds. And obviously member briefings, particularly drawing on member experience on communicating with residents as well, has been a useful part of the process, an important part of the process. And the communications programme was all designed and implemented from within the shared waste service itself, with support from the communications staff within each authority. The go live phase actually covered more than 2 months, because obviously there's a huge amount of work that happens from the moment we've agreed the individual day changes. Largely around communications, right up to the day of implementation, where the first crews left the depot to go and collect a renewal regime. Communications proved particularly effective, so we had a very low proportion of residents presenting the wrong colour bins. We'll never know the true proportion, because on any one day residents choose not to present their bins anyway, but it was a very, very small number, which was very reassuring. And from the beginning of the day changes, obviously, we were very alert to what was happening day to day, wanting to make sure that where there were any concerns or issues with delivery, that we were communicating that very quickly to residents. So we had an internal group which spoke daily at 2 PM on phone conferences to exchange information and make sure that that information or any service updates went public as soon as possible. We did, as we expected, have some problems initially, and these are listed in your paper, starting at the end of page 96. Major concern for the service is whenever we miss any collect and return bins or assisted collections, as they're referred in South Cambridgeshire. These are folk who need some assistance with their bin being retrieved from their property, emptied and returned, rather than leaving it curbside. They're often the most vulnerable, and they're the people that we prioritise if we have any service issues. We did have some issues with addresses being missed, and we have since had some addresses repeatedly missed, which we've been trying to address as a priority. And we list, obviously, within the paper those actions which we've taken to try and rectify it. Second issue was collection from flats. And again, we list that as we took a different approach to flats because of the way in which flat refuse is generally collected, and we took a different approach to communicating with residents in flats, which we learned from. However, since pretty much week 2, when we worked extensively with other teams, including housing, streets and open spaces, we've prioritised obviously those rounds in terms of both getting the rounds right and also supporting those crew, or that particular crew, with an extra vehicle to make sure that flats actually are the last likely to be missed. The issue obviously with flats is you don't have a huge amount of capacity. If you do miss a day or two, then that can quickly lead to overflowing refuse, which causes our collectors issues. One of the other issues which affected flats has also affected other properties has been around software integration. So we work with 2 different software systems for South Cambs and City, and we rely on merging data from those to provide real-time information live to each cab. Each crew has that as they go out about their rounds. The integration of that software has caused us real problems since the go live, but we have now resolved that, which is an update to your paper. So all of our vehicles either have or are currently receiving by satellite all of the updates to all of the 320 rounds for every colour of collection. As we've identified, some of the problems, particularly with flats, could have been preempted. And although we don't think we would have taken the initial round planning differently, we would have involved more crew members in a different way in looking at the draft rounds. and communicated in a different way, separate to residents and flats. Finally, we've had some differences in crew approaches, which has caused us an unexpected level actually of concerns and comments from residents, largely where we request crews check waste routinely for contamination and for wrong things basically in wrong bins and other things, and some crews obviously have been quite lenient in the past when they've had a change in crew. That's obviously brought out both us and some residents, and we have now asked the crews to be consistent obviously in what they're picking up, and we are trying to help residents, particularly picking up the first instance of contamination and dealing with it appropriately to give them that leeway. You have the outcomes to date, which I won't go through in terms of detailed numbers, but for the vast majority of residents, a continued good service has been achieved. That's not to say we don't learn from those who haven't had a good level of service, and every bin is important to us. But as I say, our key priority is to make sure residents knew which bins to present on which day initially, and then to make sure that we could keep up our collection at high levels and to not drop below 94%. You can see statistics in a table looking at the percentages collected as planned, which is one of our key performance indicators routinely. And we've also made the distinction between individual missed bins, where a crew was there and simply missed that one, and those which resulted from crews simply not getting to that whole street. And the number of missed streets has declined significantly, partly because we are changing rounds to reflect crew feedback on those which are too big, but also where we need to make sure that crews have learned rounds, got more familiar with them, and have simply increased the speed at which they're completed. Since the report was finalised, weeks 16 and 17 have been completed at 99.18% and 98.78%. You also have a little bit further information there on some of the other key things we were hoping to achieve with window changes. One of which was that no resident would then have to endure a further change to their bin day. We have changed the day for fewer than 300 residents, and largely at resident request, or where we've not identified an issue with bins being presented on the street other than the postal address. I skipped to ongoing activity, and we have obviously further updates from this, as this is a 2-week-old paper, but I think significantly, for example, almost 50% of blue bin vans have been changed since the window changes, which we would expect where we have additional properties, but also is largely a result of crew feedback, where things haven't made sense, where vans have been a bit big or we needed to swap them, and the benefit of working in that way where all bins on the same day are in the same portion of the city, and South Cambridge helps because we can move those quantities across from round to round without any impact being felt by residents, hopefully with an improvement where we have missed bins before. As I said, there's a huge amount of other work going on, and some of those have already been achieved, particularly in relation to software updates. The recommendations that we're making here is that we present further analysis to the Waste Board, which has delegated authority for overseeing the operation of the waste service by both councils. We would propose to do that in 3 months, which would include further information on costs, the wider lessons learnt feedback, because we've had a structured process externally facilitated by another council employee in South Cambridgeshire, which has included all the staff members without me present, feeding back on what they felt worked well and what didn't. So we'd like to feedback on that, some review of the modelling work which was undertaken, and a summary of complaints and recommendations. And that we propose to take the Waste Board in 3 months' time, which was the previous schedule. And also that the learning points that we have identified at the end of the paper, things we would adopt again and things which we would avoid, are adopted or avoided in future change projects. Thank you.
Thank you. It's my intention to, there's 2 councillors that requested to come in and speak on this. I think I'll bring in Councillor Roberts first, because he did a lot of work as the previous executive council with this responsibility. Then I'll bring in Councillor O'Connell, and then I'll throw it open to the floor. So, Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. I was planning basically to contribute to the discussion rather than to say anything in particular at the beginning, but I think James covered it pretty holistically. Obviously, any change of this scale is a massive change for a council, and in living memory, it's happened twice, maybe 3 times if you go back far enough. Many of the issues that happened last time were improved on, I would say, based on the members of staff we have that cross over that period. And while with any change of this size, there are clear issues that occasionally do come up, and it's important as a council, obviously, that for any future change which will happen in 10, 15 or 20 years, that we learn from what's happened in this one as we did in the previous one before my time. Overall, I think the service, in relation to the first item as well as the second item, is performing very, very well, considering the total level of retrenchment that's expected on it is quite high. We are meeting our saving targets, and I'm relatively confident we will going forward over the next few years of the plan, and as we move into the third phase in the process.
Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to speak today. My ward, as both of you will know, is Trumpington Ward. It's a very brief bit of background, mostly for committee members, because I'm sure the officers know already. Trumpington was worst hit. I think probably sounds worse than it is, but inevitably there was going to be a part of the city where the change in bin days was largest due to the change in cycle. And Trumpington was the one ward in the city, I think, where that happened. The plan was there was going to be a 3.5 to 4 week gap for some people for bin collections. I think it was 23, 24 days delay between bin collections of the same colour. That was unavoidable, nature of the change. Trumpington was already creaking at the seams a little bit. We were actually hopeful these changes would solve some of these problems. That's down to growth on the southern fringe and problems completely not of the council's making. A common one I've dealt with more than once would be, why hasn't my bin been collected? I investigate, and the answer is, well, the developers never told us there's only enough block of flats. So there was already a negative perception from some people. When the change happened, there was a lot of very negative feedback that I received almost straight away. And my first question is to do with the figures on page 99 of the report. The sort of early figures we're seeing sort of, ignoring week 2, it's an outlier, we're seeing sort of 97, 98% collection rate. And then it came up again, it's dropped back down again to sort of 98%. Now I'm a bit concerned by that, because my perception as a councillor is that things have slowly improved over the intervening weeks. If these figures include all bins, I'm worried that we're getting complaint fatigue from residents. I know some people did stop complaining to me because they perceived nothing was happening. So I was trying to get clarification on whether these figures covered absolutely all bins, including ones that were initially missed because they weren't known about the flats. Because if they were included in the figures, then I'm a bit worried. If they weren't included, then I'm happy with the figures, because I think there has been more of an improvement than is shown in these numbers. The second point is that we saw in full council there's definitely a different perception between councillors in various parts of the city as to how well things have worked. My colleagues did ask for some geographic data on where the failures, where the problems with bin collection have been, because the only breakdown we've got is individual versus, city versus South Cams. I'm a bit worried that if, for whatever reason it's closer to the depot, the north and east of the city is faring better than the south and the west, we're just going to keep sitting here and yelling at each other because we don't have data to validate or refute the difference in perception. I'm also worried whether that lack of data is a problem with the reporting system, or just getting it in a format that's been given to councillors, because as I understand it from a freedom of information request, there are quite a few agency workers currently kind of having to shore up the service, and there will sort of be a gradual reduction in the number of agency workers to reduce cost. I'm a bit worried that we're going to see a backslide in the quality of service in Trumpington if the data isn't available and the Executive Council is hearing from her colleagues everything's fine, and we're saying it's not, because the raw numbers aren't telling us where the problems are. I think that pretty much covers my questions, actually. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll try and take all these in turn, but tell me if I've missed one. Trumpington is an identified area where we have problems. So, as we say in the report, that's one of the areas where we are planning to make changes to the rounds. With regards, just bringing one of your later points, to the north or the west Suffolk, for example, we have not directed or prioritised effort in a particular way for anything other than operational and logistical reasons. So that's the priority. We had a lot of problems initially in the northern part of the city, for example in Chesterton, Kings Hedges and Albury areas, where we made changes very early on. And we have not yet made the changes to Trumpington for a couple of reasons. Our inherent problem, which we have acknowledged here, is that the rounds we designed for Trumpington, for blue and green in particular, are too big. So we want to make the changes, and in the meantime we've been sending additional vehicles to reduce the impact on residents, and also starting crews where possible at a different road each time, so it's not always the same road at the end of the round that gets missed, if one gets missed. What we are doing there is we can't confirm until about week 7 or 8, which is, I know, could be frustrating, whether or not rounds are working or not, because for the first 3 or 4 weeks, as you've identified, we have some bins were collected a week later than normal, some a week earlier, some people chose not to present. So you have to get through the first few weeks of the cycles to actually understand what is and isn't working. But by about week 7 or 8, we knew that Trumpington wasn't going to be easy to deal with, so we put extra resources there. We didn't make the changes straight away there because of the problem with the software. And we are permanently weighing up sort of risks on a daily basis, really. But if we're to make big changes to rounds without the software being right, we rely on maps. Crews, as you may have heard, are struggling with some of the mapped data, and we also can't highlight very easily collect and return addresses on maps. So we've taken the decision not to change the rounds until we've got that software right. Then we're more confident when we make the change, every crew and every vehicle that goes out can see on the screen those collect and return addresses. So now that this week the updates have gone out to cabs, we're prioritising which rounds to change next. And as I said in the paper, Trumpington is one of those, so we've identified that Trumpington and Clay Farm as particular areas. With regard to flats, the data we present here is as much as we can assure it, as accurate as we can make it. We're dealing with 2 different data systems, 2 different mechanisms for extracting data. And if anything, we think there is some over-reporting, because where an individual resident flags as a missed bin, it belongs to a missed bin, where we later identify that whole street was missed, we don't put the processing power into taking one out and adding a road, we just add it all. So if anything, we think there is an overestimate there. Flats caused a lot of problems and affected a lot of individual residents for a finite period of time, and we hit it hard early when we knew there was a problem, because we can't let flats build up. So I'm confident that the numbers here are a fair reflection of the actual service that we achieved. And we have had, since early on in the process, as you say, continued improvement with the exception of 3 individual weeks. One which I know caused us concern was around vehicles, where we had exceptional problems with vehicles, the likes of which we've not had before. One was around staff shortage, particularly on the make-up Saturday, which was unavoidable. We spoke to all the staff concerned, and there was a coincidence of issues there. And last week we saw service drop slightly, largely because of the heat. And we have asked crews, do ask them to work safely, so that's something we support. But we keep an eye on it, but we've got the figures from last week already, and we work to it all the time, and that's a big priority for us to see those percentages rising. With regards to the geographical data, I would also love a heat map, as it were, of where it's worst, as it were. That, for me, the biggest priority is making sure that those who are directing the crews every day and who are making the changes to the rounds have that, and understand that and know that, and they really do. The team managers are amazing, the crews absolutely get geography, and they get where they're missing and where they're going to struggle on a daily basis, if that's the case. What we don't have is one mapping system that works across both IT systems and can visually show that in an easy way. And I've not prioritised, because it would be an external consultant basically helping us with the mapping, doing that. What we do have are lists of frequently missed streets, which we issue whenever we have an update, and frequently missed individual properties. And that for me is the priority, is making sure that information in whatever format gets to those at the best, as it were. We've also looked at trying, for example, to cut the data by ward to send it to individual councillors for information, and that's actually proved, again, a level which operationally the systems don't reflect that sort of political boundary, so it's hard to actually map that. But again, you know, on an individual basis, we can look at what we can produce. It's just the sort of time taken to do that for the whole service. And finally, agency workers, and whether or not that's a reflection. So yes, we've responded recently to an FOI request, which is showing some of the increases in agency costs, particularly in the last couple of months. And those are in line with what we expect for when we deliver a change. So we just get more staff in, we've got 3 extra vehicles, which means extra additional workers who don't recruit permanently to come in and help during this period. We always have a percentage of our spend on agency workers, because for us it's a really good way of operating a flexible service. We can never afford to have folk sitting in a crew room not going out, but what we also can't afford is to not have crews going out and collecting the bins. So that agency input really helps us balance it, and it's also actually a really good pool for us to recruit from. People like to come and give the job a go. It's, you know, it is a really hard job, and people need to give it a go and we need to recruit from them. So I'm confident that where we recruit through an agency, that's just a routine part of the job for us. We have seen an increase in spend on agency workers, but overall we have seen that we're coming in at or under budget on overall staffing costs, regardless of those changes. I think, does that address your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. You mentioned that crews had the ability to highlight individual properties and streets were being missed very regularly. I think that's key. I think it's very useful because as a ward councillor, I'm more likely to get complaints if they keep seeing their bins missed. So if the pain is spread a little bit, that certainly does help with the public perception of the service.
Councillor Vick.
Thanks, Chair. As I've experienced this and listened to colleagues, including Councillor O'Connell, it seems that there are 2 kinds of problems, say 3 kinds of problems, in people having their bins missed over this period. The first seems to be resulting from the distribution of work between crews in the new routes, where judgments may have been made and proved tough to actually implement in the event, and therefore bins might have got missed until the crews got fully familiar with their geography, and those bins then were picked up at a later time. The second requires a bit more understanding than I have at the moment. It's that some bins, their existence was not even known, and so it wasn't a question of people not having the time on their shift to get to them. It was the fact that the crews didn't realise those bins existed or didn't know that they were up to them to empty. I mean, in a small way I experienced exactly that, and it's not all about sort of new housing developments, because I don't have those in the centre of the city. I mean, what I'm talking about is a row of houses probably about 150 years old, and for some reason these just got ignored, apart from eventual responses to telephone calls. So well into this programme, we're probably talking about weeks 9 or 10. And so the question really is, how is it that we've already understood that the actual implementation of these new routes on the 27th of February have been much deferred in time, and I think had its own consequences financially, but there was therefore no shortage of time to plan this ahead. How is it that it was possible for you not to know about all the bins that needed collecting by someone. We must have had that information, surely, and that would have been the resource that was used to allocate them to different routes. But it seemed that there were some bins that didn't get allocated to any route, and that's the source of a lot of mystery to me, that we could have got ourselves into a situation of not having checked we knew where the bins were before we tried to change the way they were collected.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points there, and I'm sure Jane might probably jump in on others. Just in terms of the individual bin issue, I obviously dealt with quite a few people who've got in contact and linking up the issue of the individual bins. From what I could see as the executive councillor at the time, the issue in an awful lot of cases, obviously not all cases, was that where two rounds met, so for example, years ago I used to live in Hartington Grove. Hartington Grove in theory would be on one bin round, but everyone in Hartington Grove in about 10 houses puts their bins out on Marshall Road. In the case of where I live now, Victoria Road, half the street puts its bins out on one side, but the round changes straight down Victoria Road to the road behind Hilda Street. So the round that was doing Victoria Road, for example, on a Wednesday for me, I think it was, there's a different round that would do the same bin on a Thursday at the back. So it's not a case of where it all fell within the patchwork, so that all those streets, no matter which side of your house you put the bin out on, it would have been got because the surrounding roads around your house were going to be had. It was where on the borders there were a particular issue where someone would have, in Cambridge and terraced housing, a house out the back rather than at the front. Now, I don't think it's realistic in terms of us, because we don't have a system in Cambridge, no council has a system where every bin is labelled. When they've tried before, they've been accused of obviously snooping on people's bins, and probably rightly so. It's very hard unless the address is on the bin, of which it's not on that many in Cambridge, to know which bin relates to which property, apart from proximity to property. Apart from that, in terms of the distribution between crews, it was clear, as far as I was concerned early on, that we had to try out the routes, and the only way we're going to know that is by and know that certain crews have too much and certain crews don't have as much, is to let it bed in. And we weren't helped at the time. I remember you emailed me early on about related but different issue. We weren't helped by having situations on the A10 very early on, which sort of wiped out a week's worth of data, where we had a fatality and it pushed an entire week out of sync. So that data wasn't useful for us. And then we had another incident on the A10 directly outside the depot. Again, we lost more data. And every time that happened, it pushed the control essentially that we would use back, and crews were picking up, catch up, as well as the round, which exacerbated the problem in the extreme cases. And apart from that, in terms of individual bins, the only other point I would make is that when you obviously move the crews round and crews are working new rounds, the crews that we have, quite often when we recruit new crew, they go out in a team that already exists, who point out where everything is and how things unlock, where things are. Changing the system and changing the days, we had crews working brand new streets, and the obvious implication of that being that they had to learn the route, and that does take an awful lot of time. And as someone who actually has gone out with the bin crew, emptying hundreds, if not thousands, individually a day, to know the minutiae of where every single bin is on certain roads. And we know that from when we go canvassing and leafleting and all the rest. Certain houses are tucked away in certain pockets. Where we tried to improve, and I've no doubt Councillor Moore has continued, is trying to stop that repeated missing of that individual bin. The problem being that when often we quickly go and do the best thing, do the right thing as a council by catching up on getting that missed bin, it's not the crew that originally missed the bin that got the missed bin. So that being the problem, that obviously they still haven't learned where that bin is. So it's sometimes it can be a catch-22.
Jane.
Yeah, one of the big lessons learned, as I understand it from the previous window changes, was around the quality of data. And one of the things that we insisted on, and was one of the reasons for not completing window changes sooner, was our determination to make sure the data was as close to 100% accurate as possible. The phenomenon you're talking about of not knowing the bins existed is something that I'm only aware of affecting around 8 or 9 properties of around 120 to 130,000, depending on how you classify them. It has been a spectacularly good data set. The issue we have is around merging some of the management into the vehicles for cruise to sea, not around the cruise space data itself. In fact, when we did our individual address mailing, which we only did in the city, for reasons of the complexity of the city compared to a village in South Cambridgeshire, which is far easier just to tackle by putting signs up, for example. We had somewhere between 200 to 400 letters returned by Royal Mail because we'd been overzealous in assuming the property had been completed and we would be collecting bin there. Because of the delay between mailing it out and actually getting to bin day changes, we were erring on the side of caution that completions would have happened. But in the instances of individual properties that have been there for a long time and we weren't aware existed, that's been absolutely tiny, to my knowledge.
So how many did you say that was?
A handful. I've just asked mine. We're not aware of there being very many at all. As Councillor Roberts has said, we have had more issues around collection where individuals can't understand why we haven't collected on the day we said we would when bins were placed on a different road back which they live. And that is an issue in some parts of the city, particularly where we've got a bit of a rabbit warren in the streets and alleys and so on. And it's largely working with the residents, getting out and talking to them about it, that we've said, well, we won't change bin days. Councillor Roberts was one of the few to receive a change in bin day, which he was very delighted by, I'm sure, but it was because of exactly that issue and the acceptance from the front of the back of the property. But I'm really happy if there are ongoing issues that we don't feel have been resolved to take those and address those and have a look at particular addresses.
Thank you for that. I mean, I'm astounded by the handful definition, because I should think my ward would take ownership of that handful, and the rest of the city then needs accounting for. But what I'm wondering, because my colleagues had requested that there be a much more in-depth member process than this, and one of the things that we would have wanted to see was what kind of data against which crews were collecting in a particular area before 27th of February, and what kind of data they were collecting against after the 27th of February, straight after the reorganisation, so that we could understand actually what the quality of the data was. I wonder if that would be possible to provide.
I just want to clarify the question. So in other words, looking at a particular geography, identifying which individual properties were named to us at the time before and after bin day changes, it would be exactly the same data set. So I'm happy we can...
Well, it was exactly the same data set and that was available to the crews doing the collecting. Then how could we get to a situation where some bins weren't collected?
No, I think... No. Well, correct me if I'm wrong.
I was just getting indications from two different people. So, Suzanne.
I was just going to come in and say, I think there's a misunderstanding about the use of language here as to whether the data set knew about the bins and whether or not the crew on the day identified that those were bins they needed to collect. We have recognised there are some streets that got missed. James explained that there are some streets where the residents' perception maybe the crew didn't know they were there, they missed a street. It was on their list to complete, they hadn't learned the round, they didn't necessarily know exactly where all the streets were, and they managed to miss that street and return the depot without collecting it. Unfortunately, because a different crew then picked up, they went and re-missed it again next week. And Jane and Michael have been doing a huge amount of work with the crews, talking individually with them, and with individual crew members coming in to help and support that process of making sure that the crews learn where all the streets are. And as Jane's explained, we've now got the data to support that. It's not that the system didn't know, it's not that we didn't have the data, it's not that we didn't know the properties existed, it's about human error in implementing a massive change, an enormous change to 30,000 bins a day. We've explained there were crews out that didn't know the geography and they made mistakes. I'd like to say, I've said it before publicly and I think I'd like to say again, on behalf of Jane and Mike, the crews worked incredibly hard trying to learn those rounds, but they have made some mistakes along the way. They have had to work really hard because on new rounds they didn't know, so it takes longer, and they were running out of time to complete the rounds. But it wasn't about them not having the information, it was about them having to go through that learning process. I think we can reasonably confidently now say that they have learned their rounds. We've still got issues, and some of the issues that come up week by week are routine operational issues that you wouldn't look at every week normally, like the fact that it's been hot, or in the winter we'll have times when the bin suffer because it's cold, it's wet, it's icy, the A10's blocked. There are routine operational issues which week by week affect different parts of the city, so we won't ever achieve 100% performance over a prolonged period. There will be days when we achieve it, but we can always expect that if you look across the course of a month, there will have been days when things happen that get in the way. But we have got the data. We have got the data uploaded to the cabs, and we will continue to keep on top of that.
Right, this has been. Go on.
Thank you.
I'm keen to bring this to a
point
close.
as well, in defence of the crews actually, who are fantastic. Davey, fantastic, amazed me, particularly on days like today. I'm very glad to be in the depot. One of the things we, as was a result of the software problems, is before bin day changes, it wasn't necessarily routine for all crews to use or rely on maps in the cabs. They have in-cab systems, electronic mapping, they know the rounds really well, they don't necessarily need to refer to maps. The maps we provided the crews were not as good as maps can be. They were the best we could produce at the time, and with the availability of the software. And neither were we ever expecting that crews would need to rely on maps for as long as some of them had to through this process. So, yes, the data's been actually fantastic. The translation to crews has been fair, could have been better, and that is feedback we've had from crew members as well. So, because we've had to rely on maps for far longer than we anticipated, again, were we to go through the process again, the clarity of that mapping for them, as a belt and braces, we thought it was good enough. We ended up using them for far longer than we anticipated. And that's where at an individual property level, we can't guarantee that 100% of them are always instantly identifiable simply because of the resolution of the mapping. But they have done an absolutely fantastic job at bearing with us while we've had to be trying to update the software for them for their in-cab units as well. Just wanted to make that point. We could have helped them more.
Right. It seems that we are going round and round a bit. Now, if we look at the recommendations, no. If we look at the recommendations, it's all about what we do in the future, the things we adopt, the things we avoid. And it seems to me that the debate that's coming on is all putting these things into question. So it's now my intention to go to the vote on the recommendations.
Chairman, you're concerning debate on this subject?
Yes.
You're concerning debate?
Yes.
This was supposed to stand in place of a member review of what happened over the last 3 or 4 months, 6 months. And you're containing it. We've got many questions to ask. And I wouldn't say we barely started, but there's a fairly large amount more to go. And I'd just like to understand if you are consciously cutting that out.
Like I say, I am keen to bring this to a close. So, can you bring people? I'll allow this, but I want you to be concise. Okay. So Councillor Dix, Councillor Tyson.
No, thank you, Chair. First, I would like to second the comments that have just been made about the hard work, and I take my hat off to all who've been involved in what has been a very complex operation. So my comments should be seen in that light. Although we have touched on the question of flats, I do believe there is a particular issue with regard to flats. And one of my questions is, why were extra resources not given to flats? Because the discussion around the table has indicated there was an awareness of the complexity of flats. And I know something about that because I have been on the receiving end of extremely unhappy people where the flat owners have been trying to store their waste in their kitchens and in their bathrooms, and it has been pretty dramatic. And so I would really like an answer as to why weren't extra resources given to the flats. And I think it's a strategic question which the Executive Councillor ought perhaps to participate in. It's not an operational matter initially, it's the big picture. In regard to the flats, could I ask why the managing agents do not appear to have been notified? The ones that I have spoken to have certainly not been notified. And it does say on page 97 that in week 2 we worked with the city housing team to direct extra crews, so there was an awareness of the need for extra crews, but city housing teams only, I think, manage or work with council flats, council properties. What I'm talking about is the large and increasing number of private blocks of flats that we have in Cambridge, where these problems do seem, have been very, very acute. So why would the managing agents not notified? And in a very small way, that continues to today. One block of flats in my ward has received a letter pointing out certain types of bags which are not allowed to go into the green bins, which was a side issue. But one block of flats has received a communication from the council, and another block of flats hasn't. So, there are still glitches in this particular area, and has left me very, very concerned about the service. And I would like to propose that the council sends an apology to blocks of flats in the city that have suffered in this way, because I think there's been a lot of distress out there.
Jane.
Thank you. When we look at planning day changes, flats are considered as a separate issue to domestic properties, because they often are serviced by a separate vehicle, as they have different bins. They have the large bins which are suitable for communal areas, and an entire round is generally dedicated to flats, which is one of the ones which had significant changes to it. We incorporated onto that round some of the bins which had previously been collected on domestic vehicles servicing houses, which had flats along their route, and we have been able to variously put bin stores into the flats round, or take them out depending on how we have found the sort of, achievement of that round has progressed. We worked very closely with one of the drivers who's got a huge amount of experience on that round, and he gave us a lot of feedback before, during and after the day change processes on what would and wouldn't work. And far be it for us to ignore that sort of knowledge. They are dealt with in the planning process as a set of residences in their own right, with slightly different needs to domestic properties. So they are strategically, as it were, as part of operational planning, considered in their own right. As I said in the paper, we've learned, particularly around communications with residents, we always have ongoing issues with liaising with managing agents. It's one of the vagaries of the job, really. We have an officer who deals a lot with lots of managing agents and has relationships with many of them. Some of them choose not to have a relationship with us. We can't enforce that. We have ongoing discussions with them, largely also around access issues, which were a major problem for residents, which is not necessarily seen by them as being a problem on the part of a managing agent, but is often seen as our problem. And as I said in the paper, a paragraph I didn't mention around access, which continues to cause us huge problems because we cannot enforce, although we are looking to achieve a lot more consistency in the method and the code and the key access to bin stores. One of the other issues which we now have, and we do feel that we largely resolved early a lot of the repeat or individual problems with flats and flat bins. But one of the issues we do repeatedly have, and will always affect us to some extent, is access. And of course, a parked car outside a domestic property will affect a domestic property. often fans, scaffolding, builders, others around flats with protection for 20, 40, 60, 80 residents. We have crews who go out, radio in, that they've repeatedly visited on 3 occasions in the morning, they've gone back to try and access block flats and just can't get in. And those are the sorts of routine problems where we want to, and we try actively to have a good relationship with managing agents. With regards to one block of flats receiving letters about contamination and another not, that would be because we focus our communications on where we have had a problem with contamination. So we don't blanket mail anybody over particular issues. It's expensive, it's not focused, it's not productive. But where we have a problem, and we might have 9 out of 10 residents in the block doing exactly the right thing with recycling, and the 10th goes down and puts huge chunks of polystyrene in blue bins, we can't accept the waste. We have to pay for it to be landfilled, and that affects everybody. So where we refuse to take it because it's contaminated, we also, we feel, go the extra step and try and help educate those residents so that we don't have to refuse the waste again. It causes endless problems. So we do consider them as a bespoke set of issues. We have learned a lot from doing this process with regards to flats. I don't think with the benefit of hindsight we would have planned anything any differently. We would have involved a few different people, but I'm not necessarily sure that attempting to communicate directly with all the managing agents would have resolved many of the problems that we've actually found with bins and wasting to flats.
Councillor Roberts.
I was just going to add to that obviously in the binary split between private and public housing, we have full control over issues of access as the landlord. And equally, what would usually happen is if you take an area where there's a high density of council housing in my ward at the top end of the Thorpeway area, the Thorpeway estate, if there's contamination, we would call out a crew to remove the contamination to access the bin, which then means that the bin crew aren't going to wait there for the sofa or the mattress or whatever's been put in front of the communal bin that's blocking access. But equally, as a council, we have an obligation to investigate it. It's on public land. It's very different with private property. What to us is fly tipping on public land isn't necessarily fly tipping to someone else on private land. And equally, there are, from memory as well, some private landlords actually opt for external contractors for their waste for different reasons. They're part of linked in with shops where the flat is and so on, and they share. And in not with this in the case of the bin round changes, but in previous cases where councils have come to me and asked about, on at least 2 occasions, it wasn't even our company. It was a completely private company of the council. So you can't underestimate the access issue. And in terms of the flat round, which is the Chamberlain round, it was identified very early on that it's going completely to plan, and we did put the extra time and resource in to try and solve some of the problems. The briefing that was held in this room in December, we were quite clear that we're not going to foresee every single problem. If it weren't for this problem, it would be a different problem before this happened. You only really can plan for what you know beforehand, but most of what we discover is only through trial and error. And we don't have the resources to factor in every eventuality as a council. It's not realistic.
Councillor Bank.
I could run through my remaining questions. I'll group them all together, Chair, if that helps to deal with this. One of the other things that we'd asked in the run-up to this meeting was about related in a way to the heat diagram that we described, about the record of complaints, which could give a similar kind of guide to where the problems were coming from. But we were told that it wasn't possible to supply a list of the complaints that had been registered. I wonder if it would be possible for us to see that when the final report is prepared in 3 further months. And perhaps also if you could comment on a suggestion that was made to me by someone's experience, and you get all sorts of things, and this is a chance to refute, of course, there's nothing in it, that there was a confusion about whose responsibility it was to register complaints, whether it would be city council staff who are answering the phone to people in the city, or whether it should be South Cambridgeshire. And clearly one wouldn't want to sort of see a buck-passing issue get in the way of capturing of important data. But it would be good if the record of complaints, relevant to the city anyway, could be provided along with what you can ever get to in the way of a heat complaint map or a density map of the implementation issues. There was an intervention in social media on the part of a member of staff amongst the crews, and point taken down after a day or so. And I wonder what the management's view is about staff giving their views publicly on a matter of this kind, whether they're encouraged or discouraged, and a sense that, on my part anyway, that whistleblowing is not an entirely bad thing to have if it actually is enabling the public to understand better. I think there's another feature of the service. We're concentrating very much here on the collection of people's rubbish, but what I understand is that there are also some other elements of the total service that are suffering whilst all of this is being dealt with, and that's not I think really recorded in the report. For example, the customer service centre here is giving out that it takes 6 to 7 weeks to deliver a new bin to someone who needs one. Apparently, bins which are in stock in Waterbeach, physically present and correct, but apparently because of the reorganisation, people need to expect 6 to 7 weeks delay, and I wonder when that feature of the reorganisation will be rectified. I wanted to ask about resilience, because I think that is one of the bigger issues here. One of the reasons for doing this merger with South Cambridgeshire was about improving resilience. So by being bigger, we could take the knocks and make the service targets just the same, or even better. I just think there's a couple of things that we've heard about which calls a bit of that into question. So the first is that the process since February the 27th was knocked off course by traffic. And I mean, obviously your depot has to be somewhere. It's in Waterbeach, but clearly traffic hold-ups, accidents can happen, and there needs to be some kind of plan, I guess, that gives early warning to when that is the situation, so that the first lorry that hits the accident queue prevents all subsequent ones from doing that, so that we aren't looking at a complete catastrophe because of a road hold-up. And then the other issue about resilience is in the report, which talks about week 14, which is a week on page 29, which where there was a noticeable relapse in performance, which was caused partly by staff absence. And that is exactly the sort of thing, in terms of resilience, that I think we wouldn't be expecting to see out of a shared service which was trying to protect us from that sort of impact. So what sort of view do you have now about resilience, and can you make plans, and does the bigger service really enable us to avoid them in the future?
I'll let you answer that, and then I've got Councillor Bird.
If James take it,
Oh, okay. Carry on, Jane.
The review of complaints and commendations is something that is ongoing. Again, we do with 2 different systems, but that's entirely understandable because residents are going to their council in order to make a complaint or a commendation. The shared waste service is not the public face of waste for each of the organisations. It's very important for residents, it's a big issue for residents, and I think it's really important for each council to hear that feedback, and then we deal with the complaint or the commendation. So the advice has always been for residents to complain if they feel the need to their council. We are aware of a few instances when an outsourced call handler advised some residents to complain to City if they'd been visited by a City vehicle, whereas actually they were a resident in South Cambridgeshire. There was a handful and it was very quickly resolved. That's the only issue I'm aware of where people were sent the wrong place, as it were. Either way, all complaints get back to the same service and we deal with them all there. And we have processes for extracting data from the systems to understand what the trends are and the sorts of things we're having complaints about. So again, we can feed back to the right folk as to what some of the major problems seem to be. Obviously, Miss Bins has been a big complaint, a cause for complaint from Miss Bin. People will complain, understandably. But we've also had complaints again about where police are placing individual bins and the stringency with which we're now applying the policy on things like biobags and various other items. So those are the sorts of things we track. We want to make sure that we are picking up and, for example, on the biobags, issuing more advice on the web page and so on to try and preempt and offer better advice to residents. And I would be happy, obviously, subject to the committee approving it, that what we do in terms of review of complaints should be available. As I say, we simply go through the waste board because that's our board for the shared waste service. With regard to social media, there are, again, for your previous comment, there are different conditions of contract and policies on social media and reputation of the council for South Cambs and City operating each. A comment was taken down by an individual. Obviously, we spoke with the individual. We spoke with the individual who spoke on the news. We speak with any individual who expresses a view which hasn't been expressed to us first. And for me, every individual has the right to comment. It is something that we're very mindful that employees are ambassadors of the organisation, and I am absolutely clear that everybody can have their own opinion. What I really, really am trying to encourage in the service is that we have that discussion and that constructive discussion right across the service. Any crew member is welcome to come talk to us, sit in the middle of the depot. We we've started a new style of drop-ins with the unions present as well, and really we're just encouraging people to talk to us first, partly because it is the reputation of the organisation, and partly because, for example, in a couple of examples recently, individuals have really agreed with their colleagues who are not fairly representing what is happening in the service. So it's something where I have to look out for all members of my team, not just the individuals who have something they wish to raise negatively, but also those who feel that it's not actually reflecting very well on them either. Service, whether or not other services are suffering while domestic issues are dealt with. With regard to bin deliveries, we have peaks and troughs in bin deliveries. We've just moved all of our stores up towards Beach Depot, so it's actually easier for us to get stuff out more quickly, and we have distribution across South Cambs and City. At the moment, I believe we're looking at around about 2 to 3 week lead time. I can understand that people may have been given a cautionary longer lead time because until last Tuesday we were waiting a new delivery for some colours, but they're all there and they are being delivered now. And yes, I believe that issue's been dealt with, but I will catch up with the call centre just to make sure we're consistent on messages that we're giving to customers on that. With regards to resilience, I'm a big fan of resilience, and I'm also a big fan of making sure that we plan for the right level of risk in service. So, for example, the heat we endured last week, I know you commented before, around the fact that we need to plan for extreme events. For me, that's a very extreme event, and where we need to plan for that sort of impact on service. That frequently we would have excesses of crews and costs because we don't normally go that slow effectively. With regards to traffic, yes, we are on the A10 and we do have traffic problems. We do have an early warning mechanism where crews who are first alerted to issues tell everybody else because they're all on radio systems. So any issues with traffic are reported. We also hear that in the depot live, so we can get service alerts out to individuals. The week in particular, the second week of operations, second or first week of operations, the A10 was completely closed because of fatality, and we had significant roadworks. Wherever, whether you've been based in Mill Road, Waterbeach, or Huntingdonshire, all of those vehicles have been going up the A10 to tip Milton. So that is one of those things. And in the months I've been there, and the years Mike's been there, I've never had a week like it. But it's an extreme event, and it is something that we try and make sure we mitigate against. So we're permanently rediverting vehicles or asking folks to help each other out to make sure we make the full capacity of the vehicle. And with regards to staff absence, week 14, that was, again, as I've said, an exceptional event. We had a very high level of absence on a make-up Saturday. And again, referring to your previous comment about terms and conditions, it's not a contractual obligation for every crew member to do overtime. It's something we rely on and we strongly encourage, and we pay accordingly. But it's not something at the moment we have full control over. And that's something, again, that we're looking at as a whole range of things we look at all the time to improve resilience. So, for example, on vehicles, not what you've raised, but I know has been queried before, we're also looking at working in a partnership way with the garage, City Garage, for them to actually own and operate and maintain spare vehicles for us to use while they are repairing our own vehicles, for example. We do now maximise the use of our fleet in an effort to not over-maximise the use of our staff, which is different from before the day changes. So previously we had some vehicles that could be out of commission more often, and we are now maximising how we use those vehicles. So building more resilience into that in this relationship with the garage is something, again, we're actively looking at. So these sorts of changes are perpetually being looked at to make sure the service operates in a sort of smooth way. I hope that answers most of your questions.
Councillor Bird.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Jane, for the report. Very good. It's like any new thing you do, there's going to be teething problems. And we've had our teething problems, and I know we're getting through them. I've had problems, residents contact me about some of the flats, but when they're gated properties, it's hard for the crews to get in, as you know. And also, some of the flats, they ring up, or email us as councillors, local councillors. We then pass on the information to people like Jane or Mike to tell them there's a problem at this certain area. There might be a bit of contamination, I can never say the word, but that's because of the residents not putting the rubbish properly in bags to stop it. I've seen photographs of one such flats in East Chesterton, and it was pretty bad. The bins were going to be emptied, but they still kept piling it in, and they all got ripped and stuff, so you can imagine what it was like. And I know you did your best to clear it up as soon as possible, but with the gated access, that's the worst. And also, if they've got a key and someone's lost the key, that's another problem. So we can get round it, and I think we're doing really well with the service at the moment. It's getting better every week. So I think we're getting through the teething problems. I just wanted to say that.
Okay, thank you for that. It seems to me that all the issues raised are actually covered in the recommendations that we're actually voting on. So I'm going to now move to the vote. So I'm not going to read all the recommendations, but they are for to adopt policies that work and avoid policies that don't, basically. So all those in favour of the recommendation? Against? Abstain. Thank you. We now move on to, by the way, I'm sorry, does the Executive Council agree?
Yes, I agree to adopt the recommendations, and I'd just like to thank everybody, particularly Jane, for her hard work in this report, and for all the officers and all the waste crews for their ongoing hard work in these changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Moore.